What's up, guys? Jason up, New Age Revolution down here in the cave. And again, it's been like, the last video we did was the, I think the XOX contest video, or maybe a TN80s Power Hour. What did we do last? Yeah, we did the Power Hour, but that was like, that was 5 days ago. I haven't been down here since. And every if I don't come down and do this, I like start to, I don't know, I start to feel incomplete. So this is where I really just wish that I could get into a groove of daily videos, but then I feel like I'd run out of material. But anyway, I need to come down here, and we might do a sappy show in the future, because I've had a lot of people telling me about how important the show is to them for their mental health. My man Larry, I think it's Bitzer or Blitzer, I'm not sure. When XOX gives me his name for the contest, I think it says Bitzer. But anyway, my man Larry B, the guy who won the most recent XOX contest, he's another one that says how important the channel is, and he's decided to send me some stuff. I mean, he wins the XOX contest and decides to send me some stuff, so that'll be a cool unboxing in the next few days. It's something that is kind of an not underappreciated toy line, but it's one that I'd like to focus on at some point. It's just the prices of these figures have gone up to stupid amounts, and I'll show you what I mean when they get here. But so anyway, the point of all that is I was thinking about making a video talking about depression, and how honestly this channel and this room and saves you guys, but also saves the heck out of me. So I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that. But right now, to get my fix, just setting some plans with it for the setting up a play date, as the housefraus say, as the moms say. Don't tell anybody I said that. Right now we're going to do a Mount Rushmore. We're going to do a my Mount Rushmore, where we talk about my personal top 4 of whatever. Right? We've talked about a lot of stuff on the Rushmore. I can't call it the Rushmore Show, because my boys over at the Rushmore Show have a show called the Rushmore Show. So I can't call it that. I have to call it My Mount Rushmore. So we've talked about a lot of stuff on the My Mount Rushmore. And today we're going to keep it wrestling themed. And we're going to talk about my Mount Rushmore of commentators. That's right. The voices, ladies and gentlemen, that we grew up with. The auditorily iconic sounds of our childhood. That's right. The fellas who called the action for our favorite wrestling organization. And when I was thinking about my Mount Rushmore, it's boring. It's boring, right? But it's auditorily iconic. You can't get the sounds out of your head. You'd recognize them anywhere. And now that I'm going back and revisiting, the Wrestling with the Past stuff, again, those sounds they're there. The voices are there. That sounds ill. The voices are not there. When I hear them again, I say, oh yeah, it's an immediate transportation back in time. So anyway, let's do it. Let's talk about my top 4, my Mount Rushmore of wrestling commentators. Number one. Look, apparently he'd been doing it a lot sooner, or a lot earlier than I ever knew, I ever experienced. Vince McMahon has been commentating on WWF television since the late 70s. Vinnie Mac, when he was just a wee lad, you know, his father still in charge, he was a commentator on Championship Wrestling, solo, and he worked with Antonino Rocca, which was well before my time. I think he might have worked with, I don't know, Pat Patterson, which is slightly coming into 83 when I start getting into it. And I think the most famous voice combination is Vince McMahon and Bruno Sammartino, because that was WWF Superstars for us in 85, 86, 87, 88. So Vince McMahon is on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling commentators. Sure. Iconic voice, his catchphrases, his apparent lack of knowledge of wrestling holds, and so, you know, the classic, well-known go-to phrase of Mr. McMahon, not Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon, is "What a maneuver!" Right? We've got a bunch of other stuff that Vinny says. He says, and then from there, without further ado, notwithstanding, you know, things like that. Vince McMahon, well-spoken, well-articulated, and iconic to the ears. And really, Vince really only did Superstars, right? Because Gorilla and Bobby Heenan did Wrestling Challenge. Vince did Superstars, and of course Saturday Night's Main Event. And I think that might be a huge reason why Vince McMahon is on my Mount Rushmore. Saturday Night's Main Event, of course, right? He didn't do a lot of house shows. I think he did Madison Square Garden shows very early, 70s. But you know, when we started getting into the 80s, we started hearing Gorilla Monsoon. And I think I just gave away two of my commentators. Number 2 on the Mount Rushmore, surprisingly maybe to some, is Jesse Ventura. Yeah, the Body. The Body, you know, again, from Saturday Night's Main Event and from WWF Superstars, working the bad guy announcer, countering Vince McMahon's good guy announcer. In fact, both were over the top. You know, Vince McMahon was an over-the-top good guy announcer. And Jesse Ventura was slightly less over the top, because slightly less meaning Jesse would give some credit occasionally to the good guys, but certainly a heel announcer. And the wonderfully insulting things that he said to Vince McMahon always made me so happy and giggle. I loved it. I loved how, you know, Jesse was just, again, the voice. You know, it's an iconic voice. Jesse Ventura, always countering McMahon, and always, you know, giving credit where credit is due, certainly. But I loved the way they played off each other. I love Vince McMahon's over-the-top reactions to Jesse Ventura's criticism or over-the-top statements. You know, McMahon would react insanely. Jesse, you know, will you stop? Or that's actually Gorilla. Will you stop? But McMahon had some comebacks for Jesse, which were great. You know, and you almost kind of thought like there was some real life banter going on between Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon. You know, and maybe you were too young to realize it then, but as I get, I mean, Jesse hasn't really entered the commentary world yet, but as I get closer to Jesse on commentary, I'll listen, of course, for the real life banter. So Jesse Ventura, Vince McMahon are both on the Mount Rushmore. So I think a lot of people would say, well, Bobby Heenan, right? Well, Bobby Heenan didn't do a ton of commentary. You know, we know Bobby from Primetime Wrestling with Gorilla Monsoon, but as I'm watching and as I'm revisiting, 1985, and as I'm working through the house shows, look, I mean, is there any more of an auditorily iconic voice in a 80s WWF fan's head than Gorilla Monsoon, right? We get Gorilla Monsoon from Wrestling Challenge, but more importantly for me, we get Gorilla Monsoon from the MSG house shows. And there's a few times, many times, where Gorilla carries the whole show by himself. He doesn't have a co-commentator. He's working the whole show by himself. Now, I do put Gorilla Monsoon on the Rushmore because of the voice, because of the sound, because of the time machine back in time. But he's kind of a, Gorilla's a very inside scoop commentator at times. Gorilla Monsoon, the commentator, hates referees and criticizes them to no end during his commentary. Hates referees, certainly hates Gilberto Roman, the referee, but is very critical of referees during his commentary. But I think, I don't know, that there's probably a motive to that. I mean, he's a former wrestler, right? I mean, is this a kayfabe motive or a real motive? He's a former wrestler, so wouldn't the wrestler criticize the referees in the ring? Sure. Why not? Gorilla Monsoon does really go to the used-up cliches of his way too often. He doesn't know the difference between a wrist lock and a wrist watch, that kind of thing. Literally hanging from the rafters, using the word literally when it doesn't apply at all. They're literally hanging from the rafters. But that's okay, right? I'm not talking about the commentating genius. I'm talking about the sound, right? I'm talking about the memories and the transport back in time. Vince McMahon, Jesse Ventura, Gorilla Monsoon. And that's why I said this was kind of predictable and boring. So I'm throwing one in here for you. Tony Schiavone, ladies and gentlemen, is on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling commentators. Tony Schiavone, the voice of Saturday Night 605 TBS, right? David Crockett, his partner from 84 to like 88, almost made the list. David Crockett, who many think may not have even been smartened up to the business at all if you listen to his commentary. In fact, I mentioned that to Magnum TA when I interviewed him, and he talked about how important David Crockett was and how fun he was and innocent and pure in his commentary. But Tony Schiavone is the guy at that podium doing the interviews and really having to stay on his game for 2 hours, not only calling the action, but NWA Saturday Night 605 TBS was a very heavy interview show. Every match, following every match, there'd be an interview at the podium. Prior to a match, there'd be an interview at the podium. There was just, that show, the angles were created at the podium. And Tony Schiavone had to be there. He had to be on. And I don't care about WCW Nitro, and I appreciate him in AEW. But my thinking is, if you're a big-time 80s commentator, it's almost like you don't blend well with new wrestling. So Tony Schiavone on AEW is fine, but he's still like 80s Tony Schiavone to me, right? Yes, Jim Ross, but Jim Ross came up with the new stuff and changed and went and worked for Japan and all that. Tony Schiavone was out of the business for a while, so it's kind of weird to hear him on AEW. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about TBS, Saturday Night, 605, Tony Schiavone. That's my Mount Rushmore of auditorily iconic sounds of our wrestling childhood. Now, I hope that there are some people out there watching the show that maybe grew up with AWA. And, Rod Trongard is on their Mount Rushmore. Or they grew up with WCCW, so Mark Lawrence is on their Rushmore. You know, because there are certainly other talented commentators out there. Jim Ross certainly belongs on a lot of people's lists. Gordon Soley, who bored me to tears, is certainly on a lot of people. Gordon Soley might be considered the best of all time. I would have him at the way other end of the line, though. I would have him at the opposite end of the best of all time spectrum. I couldn't stand Gordon Soley. It was exhausting listening to him. McMahon, Jesse Ventura, Gorilla Monsoon is literally on my list. And Tony Shivani, standing at that podium interviewing Ric Flair. I heard that Shivani got the job because of his friendship with Ric Flair, I think. So Shivani and Flair, good buddies back then. I don't know where it stands today, but he was the guy that shaped the angles on NWA 605 TBS. That's my top 4. What are yours? That's my Mount Rushmore. I have a ton of questions that are fired up and ready for another Power Hour, so we'll do that. I feel like we really got to do a movie night soon. I have not watched a movie down here since I've set up this television. I really want to watch Nightmare on Elm Street down here on VHS. Why Nightmare on Elm Street? I don't know. It just feels right on this television. That's the first movie that I'm probably going to watch down here is Nightmare on Elm Street. So we got to do that together. And we got to have a cartoon day down here, you know, a Saturday morning super show down here. We got to do a bunch of stuff. So that's that. Yeah, I should grab a few items off the eBay, get them out of the Wishbook catalog. There's 2 items that are going to be added to the 80s themed stuff shelf, and they're going to come right out of the Wishbook. So we'll do that. Yeah, I don't know. People are asking about what about the G.I. Joes? I don't know. G.I. Joes have slowed down a wee bit. You know, the collection has seemed to have come to a halt for no reason. I just haven't bought any. I need several more 1986 G.I. Joes, and I haven't bought them. I'd like to find the drive to get that going again. And I don't know. We'll figure it out. You know, some whatever happened to's. Who knows? Anyway, that's the Mount Rushmore. What's yours? Down below. You know how they do it. Good night now.